Well guys, we are getting close to that time again. Yep, Nintendo Direct season. Now, as we get through the first week of January, of course, I don't think there's any reason to expect a Nintendo Direct in January. I mean, we haven't had one since a mini Direct, I believe, in January of 2018. But since then, yeah, it's just pretty much been February Directs for the entirety of the Nintendo Switch era. So we can probably expect the same thing here. I'm guessing a full-fledged Nintendo Direct will take place sometime in the first couple of weeks of February. And to be more specific, I could see it being the first week of February because of Mario Tennis Fever coming out on the 12th, which is the second week. But as we're still a little bit a ways until this Nintendo Direct, I'm not here to predict what the show is going to be about yet. That's when Nintendo announces it. I'll be talking about that. Instead, I'm here to talk about just the importance of this show. This is possibly one of Nintendo's biggest directs yet, and I know I've said that about the first two, which were very, very big for the company, but specifically the last direct we just got in September, it was pretty lackluster for a lot of us, and a lot of people even said it was one of the worst directs they've had in a while, which is strange. It was the second main direct for the Switch 2, and the one where they were supposed to give us hype for the following year here in 2026, and they didn't really announce anything that looked super special for the year so far outside of Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave. Now, we don't know yet how well Nintendo's holiday went for the entire December, but we do know for November, it was pretty bad for the company. It was actually the lowest hardware sales in the entire industry since 1995. But the Switch 2 got beat out by the PlayStation 5, which has been on the market for over 5 years now, and also beat out by a new console that I didn't even know existed. The next Playground, which is some type of motion-based game console thing for kids. Now, also know that the Switch 2 struggled over Christmas, where it was down 35% compared to what the Switch 1 delivered during the same period in 2017. And a senior Nintendo employee blamed this on the shifting economics in the world right now, and also the lack of a major Western game. Yep, Nintendo even said it themselves. But yeah, Switch 2 sales were pretty low for the month of November, and you look at everything that came out, I don't think any of the games to end last year are going to be big enough to really amp up the Switch 2 sales. Like, I don't think anybody was going out to spend $450 just to play Kirby Air Riders or just to play Metroid Prime 4, especially when a lot of those reviews for those games were mixed. Now, Nintendo's not doing a bad job at all giving us games to play and announcing a lot of stuff like each month. You look at the lineup next year, there's stuff coming out pretty much every month into the summer. The problem is just, are any of these games going to be enough for people to go out and buy Switch 2s? Are they going to keep Switch 2s selling off the shelves? I don't know. I think an easy way to tell if a game is going to be a Switch 2 seller or not is to simply ask yourself, can you see that game being bundled with the console for the holiday? Can Nintendo bundle any of these games with the Switch 2 to replace that Mario Kart World bundle? I just don't see it happening. Closest games without a doubt are going to be Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave and Splatoon Raiders, and as a huge fan of Splatoon Raiders, I don't necessarily think a Splatoon spin-off is going to carry a lot of weight as a bundle, and I definitely don't see Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave being big enough to have bundles with Switch 2 either. I think this might just be the story of the Switch 2 right now, is just it's kind of lacking on system sellers. Now, for a lot of people, that's going to be Mario Kart. I feel like if anybody out there bought a Switch 2 who's just a casual fan of games, they bought it for Mario Kart. And the only other one I could possibly think of is Donkey Kong Bonanza, but even then, that might be a stretch because it's a 3D Donkey Kong game. We're not talking Mario or Zelda here. Now, I will say right now, Nintendo's on a completely different strategy when it comes to announcing games. Kind of, it's hard to say because on one hand, it may look like, oh, maybe Nintendo's keeping their cards to their chest close, and we won't know when a game's coming out until a couple months before it comes out, like they did with Mario Kart World and Donkey Kong Bonanza. But I feel like that's just because they were keeping it close to the Switch 2 reveal as well, because if you look at stuff like Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave that was announced at last September's Direct, we don't even know when that game's coming out this year still. So there's definitely the precedent of Nintendo announcing bigger games earlier on still. I think it's still going to happen this way, and that's why I think a big Direct to start the year next year is going to be very important for Nintendo. There is a lot of stuff in Nintendo's schedule, which is scaring people thinking that there's not going to be much new because they have so much they already have coming out. It may not be anything super interesting in that schedule so far, but I still think a lot of that stuff is just smaller things. I think some of these months we're going to see pairings. I don't think an entire month's going to be dedicated to Tomodachi Life, even though it's probably going to be really big for a lot of people, especially in Japan. And I also don't think we're going to have an entire month just for Rhythm Heaven Groove. I feel like those months can be paired with other things. Don't forget how many games we had in such little time in 2025. Like, they squeezed in a lot of stuff. Pokemon Legends ZA and the Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 remasters were both in October. Also, Kirby Air Riders Fighters and Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment also launched in 1 month time frame. And looking at how a lot of these games seem to be even smaller than those, I think it's safe to say that some of these months will be doubled up on, so I still think there's room for a handful of new announcements. I don't think that means, oh, we're only going to get 1 or 2 big games here. It could be the case, but I choose to believe that there's a couple other things that Nintendo hasn't showed us yet. So I think this Direct is very important simply because it's going to show us what to expect in the year. I think all the big games that are coming out this year are going to be announced here. Whatever is not announced here, I think it's safe to say that those games aren't coming this year. I think this is going to give us a good kind of indicator and view from now until the holiday season. I could be wrong, but that's just kind of my prediction here. So if there is a big 3D Mario, a Luigi's Mansion, or something big for the holiday, we'll probably see it here. Because if it's not here, it's just going to be another year of no 3D Mario or Luigi's Mansion or Smash or whatever it is their next big game's going to be. I think the next system seller is without a doubt going to be Pokemon Gen 10. That's pretty much already been confirmed through leaks and stuff to be happening this holiday as like Pokemon Wind and Wave. So I'm very much thinking this is going to be Nintendo's huge holiday game, but I also think it could be paired with a big first-party focused game, something like a Luigi's Mansion, potentially even a Smash Brothers, because it is kind of technically time for that. But if I had to make just bets on what these big games are going to be, I've kind of already made a whole video about what the big games of this year is going to be, and I've kind of boiled it down between 3 of them. For the 40th anniversary of Zelda, I think something like an Ocarina of Time remake just makes the most sense. Would something like this be a system seller? Absolutely. I know a lot of people hear remake and think, I'd rather have a new game, but when you look at the long development cycles of 3D Zelda games, I think this is perfectly fine. There are going to be people that grew up with this game, and depending on how beautiful the new art style and everything looks, it could be just a complete reimagining of this game, bringing a lot of people's childhoods back in 2026. I can see a lot of older fans and younger fans saying, dude, I need a Switch 2 to play this thing. And I've already heard so many different people predicting Luigi's Mansion 4 because it just makes too much sense. I mean, it's been about 7 years this October, and I think it's about time for this game. I think a lot of people are expecting this instead of 3D Mario. Of course, I'm still holding out for 3D Mario, but I do think this is more likely just based on how things have been going. I think Luigi's Mansion 4 is going to be jaw-droppingly beautiful. It's going to look like a huge game that people must play, and I can see this being a big must pick up and must play thing for the Switch 2. I mean, if you look at how good it sold with Luigi's Mansion 3 on the Switch 1, this would probably be a big system seller in my opinion. I still think the third one is actually going to end up being Splatoon Raiders, something we already know about. I don't know. I have some just feelings with this game. I can't explain it. It's just one of those games that just feels right. From the very beginning, even from the little bit that we've seen so far, it's just felt right to me. Like, I do believe that this is going to be way bigger than a lot of people think it is just because it's labeled as a spin-off, but I think it's going to be a huge action-adventure game that pulls in a lot of people. Nintendo could even bundle this game if it's big enough. We just need to learn more about it. Once we see the first official trailer and gameplay, then I'll be able to tell pretty much right away what type of game it's going to be and how big it's actually going to be. But I think this is my most anticipated game right now. I'm telling you, something about this game just feels so right to me. So with struggling holiday sales, Nintendo really doesn't have a choice to not announce some huge things in this Nintendo Direct. Like, they need to start getting the hype up. They need to announce big games that people in Japan and people in the West are both going to enjoy. Something that just a general audience is going to see and say, man, I might need to get a Switch 2 for that game, because wow. I think it's a big indicator too when we start to show what we get, because you know how Nintendo Directs work. The big information's at the beginning, the other big information's kind of in the middle, and then finally one last reveal at the very end. And that's something that kind of sours me on Nintendo Directs as a whole. I kind of brought this up already, but yeah, I just hate that there's only going to be like 2 or 3 big reveals. And the fact that we already know about something like Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave, I can guarantee at least one of those games is going to start or be the middle of the show, for sure. And that's just kind of going to take the spot up for a new announcement. So especially also if you consider Zelda's 40th anniversary, that there's going to be something there. I think it's safe to say that we'll probably only have room for one major announcement, which is kind of scary. Hopefully there's more than that. Maybe I'm just, doom posting here, worrying a little too much, but time will tell surely. But this Nintendo Direct cannot be average. I don't think it's going to be, especially with all the stuff that we already know. There's a lot of games where they can give us information on, but it has to be more than just a good Direct. It has to be a great showing for anybody, not just Nintendo fans. The people have to watch this show and say, man, now this show has given me a reason reason alone to go out and buy a Switch 2 to prepare for these big games. Nintendo needs those big announcements that result in big reactions online and lots of talk, and there's just marketing behind it from the fans alone, where everyone's talking about it, the whole world is talking about it, it's trending everywhere. They need one of those games desperately in this upcoming Direct, because if not, they're going to continue to struggle for the rest of this year until at least the summer Direct. So yeah, let me know in the comments down below what you think about this. Is Nintendo fine just having a decent Direct, or do they really need to have a big one here? After kind of having some smaller ones to start Switch 2, I think it's definitely time for a big one. But just let me know down below. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you all have a blessed day. See you guys.